Welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to practicing attorneys about their lives in and out of the practice of law. I'm Goodman, the host of the show, and yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody's perfect. He's a retired attorney. He has been a lawyer. He has sold legal cannabis. He has a close relationship with the San Francisco 49ers and the now San Francisco Warriors. He runs a documentary film company. He's had a very interesting and storied career. KurtRobinson, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you asking me.
Well, I've always enjoyed talking to you.
Same here.
And whether that's been in judicial chambers or at a restaurant in Fremont, it's always been fun.
Yeah, you left out my book. I think you were the only person who read it.
I enjoyed reading your book. Yeah, we're definitely gonna get to that. So, right now, what are you doing?
Well, right now, I'm really involved in making a documentary. It's called Ready to Be Seen. It's based on the history of protest in Oakland. And we've been shooting it for about 5 weeks. We got about 6 weeks left.
How did you get interested in doing documentary film, having been a lawyer?
I think that everybody is going to have to reinvent themselves in the new COVID world or post-COVID world. I don't think post-COVID is appropriate because we're right in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm at a point in my life where I could choose what I really want to do.
Where are you from originally?
Born in Detroit, Michigan, but raised primarily in St. Louis, Missouri.
Is that where you went to high school, in St. Louis?
Yep. High school in St. Louis, Chaminade College Prep for young men. I went on a basketball scholarship, believe it or not. It was the biggest mistake they ever made. 2 of our students are playing in the NBA right now. Jason Tatum for the Boston Celtics. Bradley Beal from Washington Wizards. Both recruited the same way I was. Catholic schools used to go to the hood and they find players, and Chaminade has been doing it for 40 years. They finally got some good ones.
When you graduated from Chaminade, you went to college.
Yeah, I went to the University of Notre Dame. A buddy of mine kind of recruited me there, and I had a scholarship opportunity to go there. Chaminade was really one of the best high schools in the St. Louis area, so I was very lucky to get a great high school education. I was a little bit of a rare commodity coming out of high school, black guy with good grades, and I had in those days an opportunity pretty much to go anywhere else.
How was the experience at Notre Dame?
Notre Dame was tough because, coming from the hood and then going to Notre Dame, it was a very foreign environment to me. I was lucky because I had the Chaminade experience, but at Chaminade, we came home at night. We didn't board there, so we came back to our neighborhoods every night. At Notre Dame, that became your neighborhood. It was a tough experience because it was a very small population of minority students at the time, and there were no women. It was an all-boys school. So it was challenging. It became, I started to say integrated, but it actually became co-ed the next year, which made it a little different and a little bit of a more broad-based school. But overall, I would have to rate the experience as great because I got a lot of opportunities, each step of the way in my life. First, I got the lucky break of getting chosen out of the schoolyard to go to Chaminade, and then I got the lucky break of getting chose to go to Notre Dame, where I ran into people who really helped me to go work. I ended up working on Capitol Hill and the congressman's office as a result of a program that I was in at Notre Dame. So overall, it was a great experience for me.
What was the experience working on Capitol Hill like?
It was a bit disillusioning because at the time that I went to work on Capitol Hill, I was interested in politics and doing something to help the community. And I was very disenchanted when I actually saw how Capitol Hill worked. It was very dysfunctional, and my main job was just going to parties representing the congressman who never really showed up for anything. So it was I'd say pretty disillusioning experience. It wasn't what I expected. It was at a time before CNN.
When did you first start thinking about going to law school?
Well, I started thinking about going to law school in the third grade when I was appointed to be a lawyer in a case where we were playing like role playing, and they said I was the lawyer because I talked a lot and I argued a lot, so they figured I'd be a good lawyer. And so I think after third grade, I knew I was going to be a lawyer.
Where did you go to law school?
I went to Santa Clara.
And
Uh,
did you go to Santa Clara right after Notre Dame?
I did. Again, it was another break that was based on disappointment. I was waitlisted at Berkeley. It was the same year of Bakke versus Board of Regents, and they canceled the special admissions program, so they just left me on the wait list. I was hoping that I was going to get into Berkeley. But when I came to California, I sure liked Santa Clara more than Berkeley. So I'd never seen palm trees or anything like that in Santa Clara. It looked like a country club. So, and Berkeley was really more like the cities I was accustomed to. So Santa Clara was actually refreshing. I never seen nothing like Santa Clara when I went there. Thought I died and went to heaven.
Did the Santa Clara law school experience turn out to be heavenly?
Well, I think this is probably my fault. It wasn't as much of a challenge as I expected.
Really?
Um, because I just, expected in those days, Lewis, and you're old enough to remember all this stuff. Most people won't be. They had the strong Socratic method tradition in law schools, and there was a movie out called The Paper Chase. I don't know if you remember that movie. Seen that movie, and I expected it to be like that, and it wasn't near as competitive or hard. And so I actually thought law school was somewhat of a breeze, and mainly I just enjoyed living in California and walking around. I don't think I left Santa Clara the first 2 years I was here. I'd never seen anything like that. I really thought I was in heaven. I had a beautiful apartment surrounded by um, beautiful plants, and I just never lived a place like that. I don't think I even went to San Jose. That's how happy I was with something like that. So it took me a while to venture out in the Bay Area.
What was your first legal job?
I was in private practice from day one.
Went out on your own.
As soon as I passed the bar, I hung up my shingle. That's what people kind of did in those days. There weren't the opportunities like my daughter had and some people had for people in those days. So I just hung up my shingle because I wasn't going to be broke if I had a ticket. So I just started the day after I got sworn in.
What sort of work did you do?
I was able to get cases through conflicts in Santa Clara County where I started, and I thought it was great because my experience practicing all over California was that Santa Clara County was really one of the most difficult counties for criminal defense. So I cut my teeth there, and I felt like that was a good place to cut your teeth because I actually found every other county I went to be more lenient than Santa Clara County. So the rest of the time I practiced, when I got out of Santa Clara County, I was just impressed with how easy I thought the prosecutors were in comparison to Santa Clara County. And I started doing juvie. So all my original cases were juvie. I got to do a lot of trials in juvenile without juries, of course. So I just started off doing juvenile trials, I'd say the first year.
Do you think that the legal system dispenses justice? Do you think it's fair?
I don't think, I don't think anything is necessarily fair in the world. I don't think the world is fair as a general principle. I don't think the legal system is fair. I think the legal system is like everything else. I mean, I think there are people who are fair and there are people who are unfair. There are situations that are fair, situations that are unfair. Generally speaking, I've found it to be better in California than what I've seen on the East Coast and in St. Louis in terms of it appeared to me not to be as political or corrupt Like in some other states, you could just buy justice. I didn't have that experience here, where I thought there was a lot of bribery or anything like that going on. Where St. Louis, Chicago, some of those places in those days, and I'm talking about the late, early '80s here, '81, '82. It was kind of different in some other communities than here.
Now, besides being a lawyer, you've had interesting experiences in the sports world. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of that with us.
Well, every few years I got sick of being a lawyer. I mean, I really wanted to do some other things. And so the first sideline career I had was representing athletes. I went to University of Notre Dame, and I was a tutor in the academic support program. During the time I was at Notre Dame, we won 2 national championships. We had really great players. And one of those players was Joe Montana, who was part of the academic support program I worked in. And in those days, Notre Dame only had 5,000 students. And I still don't think Notre Dame is a tremendously large school. I have no idea, but it wasn't like Ohio State or any of those schools where you had 100,000 kids. So I knew Joe Montana quite well. When I came here to law school, the 49ers trained at the University of Santa Clara. So when he got here, he called me. And I still joke with my wife, who said to me when he called, "What kind of name is Joe Montana? Is that a real name?" And so actually the only person I knew and the only person he knew was me. So he invited me actually out to the 49er training camp, took me to meet all the players. I got to be really good friends with a guy named Eric Wright, who I had to take a break from the podcast to answer his call. He was from East St. Louis, so we hit it off. He ended up wanting me to be his agent. So he actually was the first guy I represented, and he asked me to do it. And then I was actually those guys were all my contemporaries age wise. So because Joe was the only guy I knew and Eric I knew, my first group of friends in the Bay were the 49ers. Eric was really close with Ronnie Lott and Charles Haley and Keena Turner. In 1985, we started one of the earliest player nonprofits called the Champs Foundation, which we had programs to help underprivileged youth. And we had a great program where we actually went out with the San Jose Police Department and delivered turkeys door to door at Thanksgiving. And this was odd because we would actually go into houses and, Joe Montana show up with your door, a turkey, Charles Haley, they sit down, they talk, sit down, have hot chocolate in people's houses, stuff you could not do today. But it was great. It was a great experience for me because I got on the ground level, and then I was lucky enough to sign a guy named Charles Haley, who at the time was the Defensive Player of the Year. He became a little bit disruptive, got traded to the Dallas Cowboys, and then I ended up in Dallas with working with Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, and a lot of those guys. So just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
What's your take on dealing with the NFL?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it was the best job really in the history of mankind because it's really kind of unfair to the players that the agent gets paid a percentage of their salary when he negotiate the contract in 1 year and gets paid for 5. I thought that was so unfair that I exposed it to the players, which is really kind of how I got in the door. I charge players hourly rates like any other attorney would charge. I never charge players percentages of their contracts until maybe 10 or 11 years later when I decided to do that. But in general, I broke in by offering players hourly rates and exposing the hypocrisy that a lot of agents were getting paid on a 5-year deal for 5 years when they only took a few minutes to do it. A lot of players at the time didn't even know that the NFL contract and a lot of people don't know this, but the NFL contract is a standard form contract. The only thing that's negotiated is the base, the bonus, the incentives, the guarantees and other kind of conditions that we put in contracts nowadays. Other than that, every player in the NFL signs the same contract, which is collectively bargained. So it's probably as easy a job as you can have and as good a job as you can have at the time because an agent was getting anywhere from 4 to 5% for maybe 2 or 3 days of work, and you still get paid for the life of the contract. So being an NFL agent can be extremely lucrative at the cost to the players.
You had some dealings with the NBA as well?
Probably the most publicized thing I did with the NBA was representing Latrell Sprewell, and also when the whole I don't know, this is a long time ago when PJ Carlissimo was the coach. My client was accused of choking the coach in practice. So that was probably the most interesting NBA experience I had. Was representing Freewell during the time he was accused of choking the coach. And basically what happened was Carlissimo was really giving Muggsy Bogues a hard time, and Muggsy was a great friend of Spree's, and Spree didn't take kindly to it and went bad on, led to the famous choking incident. So we dealt with that, and that actually became national news, and I learned a lot about dealing with the media. At the time, I was reticent to deal with the media, so I actually hired Johnny Cochran because he was coming off the OJ trial, and I hired Johnny for $5,000 to be my co-representative. And of course, once you bring in Johnny, it really became a big media circus, and I was actually glad because I learned a lot from how Johnny dealt with the media, and I was actually glad not to have all that because it was really, when you deal with a story like that. I actually had another story
Can you
like
be
that.
specific? Can you be specific about something that you learned about dealing with the media from Johnny Cochran?
Well, when you deal with an incident like that, if you're new and you've never seen anything like that, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming how everybody in America has your phone number immediately, how media trucks are outside your house. It was, for me, overwhelming, and I did not feel like I had the expertise to deal with it, and Johnny loved it. And so what I learned from him was calmness, because
Calmness.
right, when I first came around the corner with Johnny, the media pushed me out of the way, and I was lead counsel in the case because they didn't know who I was. All they knew was Johnny. So what I loved about that was I kind of got to learn from him. I have a very interesting story about that day. I've never seen anybody do this before or since, and at the time I was just happy to be working with Johnny. And we were leaving the Sprewell press conference, and he was late for his flight to LA. And he asked me to call Southwest Airlines and ask them to hold up the plane for him. And I'm like, really? You see, oh yeah, I do it all the time. So I called Southwest Airlines. We actually got through to the pilot, and the pilot let the passengers take a vote of whether they would delay the plane for Johnny Cochran, and they voted unanimously no. But I was shocked that he had the courage to do that. I mean, like, who calls the airline and say, hold the plane for me? But I learned a lot from him in terms of just confidence and calmness.
You wrote a book called On the One. What's that book about, and how did you come to write it? And I've read it.
Yes.
So how did you come to write that book?
Actually, I had a very blessed career. I had a client, a former client who I represented that actually didn't make the NFL, but became a tremendously successful real estate investor who basically came back to me and said, "Kurt, I always wanted to work with you. I want you to write a book on, kind of what you went through and being an agent." I said, "Well, I'm not willing to do that because I'm not willing to out my clients like that. But I did agree to write a novel that was, I'll say for the purposes of the podcast, loosely based on my experiences, although I don't know if it was loosely based on it or not. So that book really came out of a book that I was asked to write, and basically got an advance to write, and I wrote it. It was my first novel. I was on the one. I actually have a contract for a second one that I never just really got around to. But again, it was more based on my experiences. Once I went to Dallas, representing Dallas Cowboys was a completely different experience than representing the 49ers at the time. I found out the
Why?
49ers, for the
Why
most
was
part.
it so different? What was so different
Well, I
about it?
think there's a lot of things that are different. Number one, I think even though the 49ers were a big deal in the Bay Area, there's so much to do in the Bay Area that everybody wasn't a 49er fan. In Dallas, everybody was a Cowboy. And the profile of the Dallas Cowboys, even though at the time they really couldn't spell Super Bowl, and Jerry Jones says that they couldn't spell Super Bowl until they got Charles Haley, they were still a much more high profile team. You know, they were called America's team. And so in Dallas, the Cowboys were revered far more than the 49ers were revered in the Bay Area.
So did you live in Dallas at the time?
I didn't, but I spent a lot of time there with Charles Haley.
Tell us a little bit about this cannabis business.
Well, I think I was having issues in terms of law, and I was really over it, to be honest with you. I was looking for a way out. The cannabis started, legal cannabis, I think 3 years ago. I felt that it was going to be successful, so I started really specializing my practice in obtaining licenses for cannabis companies. So I did that for a few years.
What's your family life been like?
So my family life's been great. I have two daughters. I'm very proud of both my daughters. They're tremendously successful. My youngest daughter is currently in Germany with her husband, who's in the military. My oldest daughter, actually, very proud of, was the youngest partner in the history of Latham Watkins. She made partner, I think, at 32 or 33. She is the hiring partner there now. She represents Beyonce and Miramax Films, and was named one of the top 30 Hollywood power brokers in the country in a recent article in Hollywood Reporter. So she took my law career and devastated it in just a few years. And we're super competitive. She was a big basketball star at Harvard, and she just generally destroyed her father's career. So now I'm trying to get an Oscar. That's my joke with her. I'm going to get an Oscar because she hasn't done that. But her first case was the Michael Jackson wrongful death. So, I mean, she just walked into the legal world and she's been killing the game. So I'm very proud of that. My other one I'm equally proud of because she's been giving me grandsons. I never could get boys. I had these two girls, but in the last 5 years, I've got three grandsons. So.
What sort of recreational pursuits do you have? Anything that you like doing besides working all the time?
Actually, I'm not a guy who works all the time. I really love working out. I mean, I see you all the time. You're kind of a fitness enthusiast. I think I am too. I used to love going to the gym, but now
I used to like going to the gym too.
Well, I got everything here now. You know, I got a trampoline, I got a boxing bag, I got a dip bar, I've got weights. So I've adjusted, but I love working out. I love staying fit. I'm proud to be back at my college weight over 40 years after I left. So that's the main thing. I really, I know we're not on the COVID subject, but my view of this COVID thing is since there is no organized governmental response to it, that we have to have individual responses. And I feel like one of the best things you can do to fight COVID is stay as healthy as possible. I really spent a lot of time just trying to be healthy.
If you came into some real money, like a couple of $1 billion came your way, what, if anything, would you do different in your life?
That's a good question. I think if a couple $1 billion came my way, I don't think anybody needs a couple $1 billion. So I think I'd be like Bezos's wife. She gave like almost all of it away. I mean, my wife just walked in and looked at me, so I'd have to keep about $500 million for her. The rest I'd probably give away. I think at this stage, the material things don't really matter to me as much. As you know, Lewis, the older you get, the more you focus on who you love and who loves you, right? It's not everybody can go hang out in Tahoe and live the life, but I think though that you accumulate enough material things that you really, I think, appreciate the bigger things in life at this point. So I think it's just so much going on in the world that you could address with that. That would probably be my first priority.
Kurt Robinson, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've found out a number of things that I never knew about you, and it's really been an honor to have you on Love Thy Lawyer.
Well, thank you, Lewis. It's been an honor to talk to you. I think much more than for me to be here. I just appreciate you asking me, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, whether in person or at the Country Way or on your podcast. So I really appreciate you having me.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. Many thanks to my guests who have contributed their time and wisdom and make this show possible. Thanks as always to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Lewis Goodman.
I think it's in the best interest of the lawyer, but rarely in the best interest of the client.